Hello students, let's move on to the next topic in our syllabus. The next section that we have is The Bet, written by Jules Verne. Students, let me first tell you something about this story. It is actually an extract from a very famous book by the name Around the World in 80 Days. The book follows the adventures of Phileas Fogg, who sets off on a journey around the world because he places a bet with his friends that he could do it in 80 days. So, before we start understanding the lesson, let me first introduce you with the different characters in the story. Phileas Fogg, who is the main character in the story. Then there is Jean Passepartout, who is the assistant of Mr. Fogg. The next character is Mr. Fix, who acts as a detective in the story. And then there are Mr. Fogg's friends, namely Andrew Stuart, John Sullivan, Gauthier Ralph, Samuel Fallentin, and Thomas Flanagan. Scene 1. In this scene, Mr. Fogg is interviewing Jean Passepartout for his new attendant. He has recently dismissed his previous assistant because he brought in water for shaving that was 2 degrees colder than usual temperature. Then he describes him about his daily routine, which he never likes to change, such as he wakes up at 8 o'clock in the morning, then he takes his tea and toast at 8:23 am. He wants his shaving water at 9:37 am at exactly 84 degrees Fahrenheit. He goes for a bath at 9:40 am. Then he goes to the Reform Club at 11:30 am. He then further tells his new assistant that he eats his lunch at the club itself and comes back home at midnight. He also warns Passepartout that he would not tolerate any sort of changes or delays in his routine life. In scene 2, Mr. Fogg is seen playing cards with his friends at the club, and all are talking about a bank robbery that they have just read in the newspaper. In that, a man has stolen away £55,000 from a bank and has fled away, having dressed up as an English gentleman. One of the friends says that it's very easy for the man to disappear, for the world is quite big. On this, Mr. Fogg says in a debating manner that in present time it is possible to go around the world in just 80 days. And he places a bet of £20,000 with his friends who disagree with him on this matter. As soon as his friends accept it, Mr. Fogg is ready to leave for the journey. It was October 2nd when he leaves and wishes to return on 21st December, that is exactly after 80 days. In the next scene, Mr. Fogg rushes into his house and speaks to Passepartout about packing the bags. Within 10 minutes, they pack a carpet bag and leave. But, unknown to Mr. Fogg, a man named Mr. Fix, who is a detective, is following them. Actually, Mr. Fix is in search of the same thief who had robbed a bank. Since Mr. Fogg is dressed up as an Englishman, Mr. Fix has mistaken him as the thief and follows him to arrest him. In scene 4, Mr. Fogg and Passepartout are travelling in India. They have travelled to a few places before reaching Allahabad. They are seated on an elephant and crossing a forest when they see a young woman loaded with heavy jewelry and walking to a funeral. Suddenly, Mr. Fogg realizes that the woman was in danger. Her life was in danger and wants to save her. By the time Mr. Fogg would do something to save her, Passepartout slips out and saves the woman and comes back along with her. Her name is Oda. She is thankful to them for saving her life. Oda then accompanies Mr. Fogg for the rest of his journey. As soon as Mr. Fogg, Passepartout and Oda reach Liverpool in England on 21st December, Mr. Fix, who has been following them all the time, arrests Mr. Fogg and puts him into the jail when they are only 6 hours away from London and from winning the bet. Soon, it is clear that Mr. Fix mistook him as the wrong person. He released Mr. Fogg, but Mr. Fogg lost the hope of winning the bet because he wasted a lot of time in jail. He is now welcoming Oda to his house but is very sad. He thinks he has lost the bet and has become poor. And then Passepartout comes running in and tells that he has found out that it was a Saturday. He tells Mr. Fogg that he has made a mistake of one day. They have arrived 24 hours before the assumed time. So, without wasting any time, they immediately rush towards the Reform Club. This is the last scene of 21st December 1872 when Mr. Fogg is supposed to arrive at the Reform Club after finishing his tour of 80 days. 4 of Mr. Fogg's friends who had placed the bet are waiting for him at the club. Mr. Fogg loses the bet if he comes after 8:45 p.m. So, all of them are continuously looking at the clock, which is showing 20 minutes past 8, that is 8:20 p.m. When last few minutes are left, they start assuming that Mr. Fogg cannot arrive on time because there was no news of him boarding any steamer or a train. All seem to be quite tensed. So, to break the tension, in the meanwhile, they also play a card game called Rubber. Suddenly, they all hear some noise of hurrahs from outside. The door opens and they see Mr. Fogg arriving when only last 5 seconds are left. And finally, Mr. Fogg wins the bet of £20,000. So, in this way, Mr. Fogg won the bet with his friends. But we need to know how could he arrive one day before than what he had assumed. According to Mr. Fogg, the day when he arrived in London was Sunday, but it actually came out to be Saturday. This is because since beginning he was travelling towards east. That means going towards the sun. So he gained 4 minutes extra for every degree of longitude he crossed in this direction. There are 360 degrees on the circumference of the earth. If we multiply these 360 degrees with 4, we get 24 hours, that is 1 full day. So, this is how Mr. Fogg went around the world in 80 days and won his bet. With this, we come to an end of the lesson. Students, please watch the video properly to understand the story well. Thank you.